Yo. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the grand finale of the Lost Horror Media Iceberg by Eric Thing. Let's jump right into it. El Alimento del Miedo. Starting this here out, we have El Alimento del Miedo, or The Food of Fear in English, a lost 1994 Mexican horror film that takes place in an underclass neighborhood of Mexico City when a circus comes into town. Quote, Don Ramon and his wife Petra have to take care of the daughter of a neighbor nicknamed Flea, who had been jailed for drug trafficking. Petra thinks that Flea must earn a living, despite her only being 5 years old, and entrusting her with several domestic tasks. The little girl later befriends Pepito, who works as a clown on the street. Complications arise when a person with satanic tendencies arrives at Ramon's house and develops a romantic interest in Petra. A fight between the three adults causes Flea to suffer a fatal accident. So as not to get into any trouble with the authorities, Petra uses Flea's flesh to make tamales that she sells on the street, unquote. The film is quite obscure and sounds pretty fucking bad, if I'm gonna be honest with you. And it only ever aired originally in various Mexican cinemas, and it received pretty poor ratings. It never had any known posters or advertisements, and the fact that half of its cast has since passed away makes finding a copy of it all the more difficult. Some photographs of the film were revealed in an interview with Jorge Victoria on the ADR Network's In Vivo channel, but besides these, nothing else has been found of this film as of yet. Amanita Pestilence. This is a 1963 Canadian psychological horror film about a Montreal resident who develops a bizarre obsession with a seemingly indestructible fungus that is quickly destroying his previously perfectly maintained lawn, which honestly sounds like the concept for a perfect horror movie starring Hank Hill. The film was apparently Canada's first color film and was shot in both English and French, while maintaining the same cast. However, it was also a commercial failure and never received a video release of any kind. According to the wiki, quote, its only known televised appearance was on the Movie Pix channel on May 10th of 1998. Currently, Amanita Pestilence is available for rental on VHS at the Library and Archives of Canada in Ottawa, Ontario. According to a 2017 Letterboxd review of the movie, the VHS is deteriorated and looks like it was made in the 80s. On March 28th, 2024, YouTuber Green Halo posted 24 minutes of footage from the film. It's currently unclear where he obtained this, though. Then on October 6, 2024, a collection of 27 production stills, some of which include a brief snippet from plot details, were uploaded to the Internet Archive. Then finally, on December 28, 2024, a complete copy of the French-language script was uploaded to the Internet Archive, unquote. Seeing this clear momentum makes me think that it's only a matter of time before this film is fully released on either YouTube or the Internet Archive. Castle Sinister. This entry is about a lost British horror film from 1932, notable for being one of the earliest known British horror movies. The movie was about, quote, the story of a young man's adventures in a large country mansion, with a scientist who is engaged in forwarding his theory that rejuvenation by the transfer of certain glands is more than a possibility. There is a girl, of course, involved to supply a necessary love interest, and a misshapen creature, victim of the scientist, to supply some thrills." Unquote. The movie didn't seem to get very high reviews at the time from critics, which is sadly the only things that we have as proof of the film's existence. And there's currently no footage, trailers, stills, or even posters of Castle Sinister that have survived the years, though we do know it was apparently a quota quickie, which were B movies made in response to the Cinematographic Films Act of 1927. But yeah, that's about it on this one. The Dream Woman. This entry is about a lost horror drama film from 1914 about a guy who is haunted by a dream of a young woman trying to stab him with a knife. With each birthday he has, the dream becomes more lifelike and real, and later on when he leaves his house, he spends the night in an inn, and when he wakes up, he sees the dream woman before him with a knife at the ready. His panic wakes the innkeeper, who comes upstairs to find no intruder and removes him for the disturbance. The apparition appears again, causing him to run until he collapses into his mother's arms. Then later, he meets up with some woman and ends up marrying her, I guess. However, this girl he married is often drunk, and after the two have a fight, she vows to, kill him, I guess, in, his dreams. He ends up running away from home after finding out her intentions. Several years pass by, and then she eventually finds him and finally kills him, the film ending in the afterlife. The movie is completely lost, save for a few stills that I've been showing on screen. Certainly sounds like it was, quite the interesting tale though. Bro can't catch a break with the ladies, I guess. The Ghostbreaker. The Ghostbreaker is a 1914 lost horror film, an adaptation of a 1909 Broadway play. The film is about Princess Maria Theresa, who is looking for her jewels after dropping a box containing them, and then a secret compartment in the box opens. Inside is an old text which mentions a locket, which will tell a location of the Aragon family treasure. However, she finds the locket has been stolen by her maid, Carmencita. Carmencita is stabbed by her rival, Juanita, over a man, and while on her deathbed, Carmencita admits to the princess and her brother that she sold the locket. Duke de Alva overhears this and begins to look for it, as does the princess and her brother. After that, I'll just say a series of events, deaths, and at one point, a haunted house gets involved. That's not really haunted, but filled with men in ghost costumes occurs, and yeah. The film was just over 60 minutes in length, despite it being quite successful at the time, has since been lost for quite some time, with only a few stills currently existing as proof it ever existed at all. The Ghostbreaker 1922. This one is a different adaptation of the play. Once again, it is sadly lost though. The description for this one sounds sort of similar to the last, but with a few differences, with the plot being about a young man and his manservant who are escaping from a backwoods family feud. They are then persuaded by a beautiful young heiress to help her get rid of ghosts in her newly gained Spanish castle. The ghostly sightings, however, are the work of Duke de Alba, who hopes to seize the castle's hidden treasure and use it to win the hand of the heiress. Also, the front cover has, this, so you know. Kansas City Blender Massacre. This one is about a lost 1986 short horror film about a serial killer who uses a fucking blender to kill his victims. Not the most efficient slasher movie weapon, but I guess with the 80s having literally hundreds of slasher movies, you had to find some way to stand out. Not much else is known about this movie though, besides the basic description. And while some of the director and his film works, Todd Sheets, have been released on Blu-rays before, this one, alongside several other films by him, have never seen the light of day. When Todd Sheets was asked by the horror film podcast No Budget Nightmares about if he had a copy of these films, or the others that have yet to be released, he said while copies were made and rented at local video stores, he has no actual copy himself. The New York Centerfold Massacre. This entry is about a 1985 short horror film that never actually saw a full theatrical release, nor was it ever sold in stores, and instead, you could only ever obtain a copy through an exclusive mail ordering service ran by Macabre Video Underground. According to the wiki, the plot was about, quote, models in Centerfold, New York are being slaughtered by an overprotective Christian mother with a potato sack over her head. Her methods contain chugging acid down their throats, knocking them down with a tripod, and shining flashing lights at their faces. The police are under investigation, finding the one responsible for the grisly murders, unquote. Now, bearing all that info in mind, half the footage for this film has never been released, period, as it was accidentally deleted during production, as well as being deleted from the final cut, with director Lou Ferrioli noting, quote, the best footage of NYCM was lost not in the fire, but on the set as a crew member put in a recorded shoot tape as a blank. And so the best slasher scenes with a couple great buxomy models were erased. And these models really were centerfolds. I couldn't afford to bring them back with another shooting day, unquote. Which, I gotta say, has gotta sound like one of the most sleaziest ways you could have possibly described footage being lost, but whatever. All the master copies of the New York Centerfold Massacre were destroyed when a warehouse that stored the master copies caught on fire. As of now, new webcam footage was spliced in the first few minutes of the movie. But overall, this has gotta be one of the hardest films to ever actually have been seen, accidentally, intentionally, and just overall, making the search for even what remains a daunting task to even consider. So yeah, you can probably count this one out. Das Phantom der Oper. This is a rather interesting one. It's a 1916 silent film that was the first ever adaptation of the famous Gaston Leroux novel. It was made in Austria and based on accounts from those that saw it, and fairly close adaptation of the novel except for the finale, where the film apparently differed in that the water trap where Raoul ends up is replaced with a furnace room, and notably, unlike the novel, Christine does not accept the Phantom's love. Instead, Raoul and his male companion find a small opening in the trap room, find Christine and flee together. The boiler to the trap overheats and explodes, killing Eric in the blast, which I suppose is an explosive finale, but once again sort of misses the whole point of the novel and the original story. However, all the same, no stills or footage of this film are known to exist, as it was sadly most likely destroyed or misplaced over time. The Weekend It Lives original cut. This entry is about a 1992 urban horror film that was marketed as a spoof of slasher films, and it was apparently had a budget of only $650. The movie, for obvious reasons, only had a limited theatrical release in Baltimore, Maryland, specifically, before then falling forever into obscurity. However, then sometime later in 2003, a video distribution company by the name of York Entertainment bought up the rights to the film and made several changes to it, with a now inconsistent tone, scenes completely out of order or missing, leaving the film a huge fucking mess essentially. They also randomly added some unknown rap artist and generic horror music to the soundtrack of the movie as well. Well, honestly, the film seems like it was always a rather shit affair, with critics at the time considering it pretty bad with shoddy camera work, audio, and just generally an amateur affair. It's kind of wild that a company saw all that and said, fuck, let's make this brap ass shit worse. Not sure what the motivation was there, but yeah. Now the version that's available to watch is an even worse version of an already bad film. I guess I should have noted this, but when they did all these edits to the movie and re-released it, they also changed the title from The Weekend It Lives to Axum, a slasher movie that apparently actually has no one killed with an axe. Very disappointing. This movie is also mostly known because of Brad Jones, or the Cinema Snob's coverage of it back in 2010, which is pretty funny. But anyway, the original version of the film is still lost to this day. Cruel Ghost Legend. Cruel Ghost Legend is a Japanese horror film from 1968 that for a while not much was known about, it first being discovered via a Japanese Amazon listing, and this synopsis of the film, on the back of the VHS sale, which notes the movie is about a blood curse that leads to numerous bloody deaths, incest, and a ghostly manifestation, and ultimately suicide. It's seemingly fitting neatly into the early splatter movies from Japan that have gotten more popular over the years as we over here in the West started to discover them. This didn't go missing for long though, as on March 7th of 2014, an anonymous contributor uploaded an unsubbed VHS rip of the film, and later on September 23rd of 2020, Lost Media Wiki user Tom Servo uploaded a 1080p Japanese TV broadcast rip of the movie to his YouTube channel, making this one found and quite easy to be able to watch right now, should you so wish. Freaky. This entry is about a horror sci-fi TV show that aired in New Zealand and Australia from 2004 to 2010. The show featured children ending up in bizarre scenarios and being placed in situations such as facing aliens, supernatural forces, and other such strange phenomena. According to those who watched it, they said the show was quite disturbing and gave many young viewers nightmares. Some episodes featured graphic content involving children getting their faces eaten, dying, and even being eaten by sharks, of which was pretty damn intense. For some time since then, there has never been any home release of the series, and so it was considered a very rare show to find at one point, with only a couple clips of the show having shown up online. That is until March 14th of 2016, when Reddit user Golden Molars uploaded the show in whole, all 39 episodes onto Mega for anyone to download, making this one completely found. Freaky Stories. This entry is about a Canadian animated / live action horror TV series that aired from 1997 to 2000. According to the wiki, quote, the show's 35 episodes each consist of 4 animated shorts of varying artistic styles, based on various urban legends, with each short running roughly 5 minutes, and opening with the show's trademark phrase, "This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine of a friend of mine." The shorts are interspersed with live-action segments hosted by 2 animatronic puppets, Larry the Bug and Maurice the Maggot, although notably, when aired in some countries, said segments were withheld from the broadcast, unquote. For some time, only about 50 of the 140 segments that was made for the show was available online, up until September 12th of 2015, when Lost Media Wiki creator Dynacast released 8 episodes he found on a VHS entitled Freaky Stories Pickled Brains for Found Media Week. Then starting from April 4th to 2020, and ending on July 4th the same year, YouTube user by the name of TV Shows would upload the entire series, making it fully found and easily available to watch. Garage Bad Dream Adventure. This entry is about a Japanese PC/Macintosh point-and-click game developed by Kinotrope and directed by Tomimi Sakuba, released in early 1999 with a limited release of 3,000 copies according to the wiki. The game features bizarre, surreal, often nightmarish, as the title implies, and sometimes graphic imagery. The player controls a small alien-like robot, maneuvering their way through a barren, foreboding landscape of cracked wood paneling and old, rusting machinery, complete with creepy, lifeless faces. The eerie background music, or lack thereof at times, only adds to the sense of impending danger, making for a very unsettling atmosphere. A 2013 search effort for the game, spearheaded largely by 4chan's VR board, had uncovered multiple copies for sale, though said copies were always immensely expensive. It was also discovered that a special private edition was made available for a very short time in April 2004 through Sakuba's official website with a limited release of only 90 copies, all of which were sold in a single day. This version featured the game itself, plus a collection of concept art. Notably, around the same time, the standard edition of the game was also made available for purchase, again in somewhat limited quantities, on Sakuba's website up until September 2007, when it was officially discontinued. Despite all these re-releases, Garage had not shown up online at all prior to 2014, leading to the game becoming incredibly rare, with only some thousand copies available in total. During this time, several people claimed to own copies of the game, though all of them were reluctant to provide a rip to the online community, fearing retribution on account of Japan's strict anti-piracy laws. One owner, however, recorded an entire playthrough of the game. Additionally, 2 short trailers were unearthed around this time. Then by early 2014, a copy of the game was put onto Yahoo Auctions Japan and was quickly bought by the HG101 Proboards.com user CC0 for 77,000 yen. The game was then arranged to be shipped from Japan to the US, then to Australia due to potential issues regarding Australian customs, where it was ripped and uploaded by CC0. The .dmg file for the Mac version can be downloaded in another mega file. Following the game's upload, CC0 also provided a collection of scans and photographs of the manual, box, case inlaid disc, and included map. And on December 10th, 2021, the game was released on the Google Play Store and App Store, and on July 7th of 2022, the game was even re-released on Steam, these versions also having translations for English, simplified Chinese, and traditional Chinese, making it the first time the game has officially been released in any other language besides Japanese. You've been looking at gameplay footage for the game in the background all through this segment, and it's certainly a very interesting game aesthetically, and feels truly ethereal at points, capturing a strange dreamlike or perhaps nightmarish atmosphere. And it's pretty cool that finally, after all this mystery and mystique that's been built around this game, that it's finally easily available for anyone to go and purchase and play right now. In the Mind of the Damned. In the Mind of the Damned was the second film made by the Dunn Lissick production company in 2013. The Dunn Lissick film group was best known for their Z-grade monster movie, The Melonheads, in 2011, which gained popularity after being featured in a Cracked magazine article. According to the IMDb, that film was about, quote, Brian Clark, who is a researcher looking into the truth of Allegan, Michigan's local melonhead legend, pairing up with a local man, Joe Dobbs, the two attempt to track down the monster, unquote. It was a campy horror film all in all, while the In the Mind of the Damned film, which for some time was shrouded in obscurity, far less campy, and much more of a psychological horror film, if focusing on a man having a mental breakdown following a bad acid trip, as he begins to have a series of stranger and stranger dreams, which fade the line between dreams and reality, and at some point it not becoming clear what is dream and what is real. The film starred most of the male cast from the Melonheads film, and was primarily shot in and around the Eastern Michigan University that's now been demolished, historic East Campus, likely months before its destruction. According to the film's director, Dave Lissick, the film was pulled from general release on account of the actor's dislike for the film's plot, particularly in its drug use and murder themes. The movie appeared briefly on a public domain website before being pulled due to legal disputes. And that's sort of how things remained up until December 24th of 2018, when an anonymous user received a copy of the full movie from Dave Lissick and uploaded it into a Google Drive, which you can now go and download and see the full movie for yourself. Or you could just watch it here on YouTube actually. It's only 37 minutes, so might as well check it out, I suppose. Kurt's Bloody... Oh boy. Now, given the name of this one, you might think you know what it's about. That being, you know, Kurt Cobain's real life. But that's not the case. It's actually the unofficial name of a short homemade movie shot on Super 8 by Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain and bassist Chris Novoselic in 1984 in their hometown of Aberdeen, Washington. It's a short 10-minute edgy home movie, basically with creepy visuals, and it gets its name because at some point Kurt is seen stabbing himself with a knife, and at one point he also stabs a dog. Again, very edgy. Anyway though, you can actually find them here on YouTube on a video titled Kurt Cobain Horror Movies by YouTuber Kermo Dungeon, Nirvana, who seems to have an archive of sorts of all sorts of footage and documentaries related to Nirvana. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The Mummy's Dungeon. This entry is about a 1993 horror film about a man who, for unknown reasons, wishes to resurrect Egypt's ancient warriors and help it claim its rightful place in the world again. To do this, he lures in models to his house for a supposed photo shoot and sacrifices them to an ancient mummy when they're distracted and unconscious. It was lost for some time, but it has since been uploaded to the Internet Archive. Quickly glancing over some of the movie, it's really low quality, almost like it's been recorded on VHS tapes, and the lighting and the general acting is, as you might expect, pretty fucking bad. The mummy design is kinda cool for what it is, I suppose, on such a low budget, but that's about it. The Painting of Horror. On that note, this is another film by the same director as the last, G.W. Lawrence, and distributed by Wave Video. It was only ever released in a limited capacity on a VHS tape copy of the Kind of Meat You Can't Buy at a Store tape, it being just a 20-minute short film released as part of a larger compilation. Like the last though, it has since been uploaded onto the Internet Archive. The movie is about a painting of a deformed Necronomicon. One girl takes a closer look, pokes at it, and the painting eats her alive with its oversized tongue. But as the article notes, most of the movie is actually just kind of fetish material, with girls changing into lingerie, giving lap dances to an old man who was also in the Mummy's Dungeon, and most of the movie having nothing to do with the horror concept whatsoever. It apparently even ends without the horror concept ever being brought up again. Just weird Gooner shit, basically. White Elephant, The Battle of the African Ghosts. This one is apparently a comedy drama horror film from 1984, with the premise being described by the article as less of a horror film, despite what the poster would have you believe, and more of a weird comedy movie of sorts. It even being described as a family movie at one point, where basically this rich guy comes in to modernize the country of Ghana, only for the locals to resist and show him more of their culture until he sees the errors of his ways. But at any rate, the film was lost for some time until eventually it was found on September 27th of 2019, when the YouTube channel Bonsai VHS uploaded the full English dub for the movie, before then being taken down by the copyright holders. I am unsure if it's been re-uploaded somewhere else by now, or if it's basically been lost all over again, but yeah. The Nun YouTube jump scare ads. So funnily enough, this one is actually an entry from Tier 2. However, Eric Fang is constantly updating his icebergs on icebergcharts.com, and so I figure I'd add it here, just to be as thorough as I can be. Anyway, this entry is about a set of YouTube ads that came out in 2018 for the supernatural horror film The Conjuring 2 coming out. These ads became rather infamous, however, because they ended up being removed by YouTube later due to their shocking content. The advertising campaign for the film began on YouTube in August of that year. However, instead of using the film's trailer, the user was tricked into a false sense of security before getting jump scared by Valak. One of the ads shows a few seconds of the volume button going down, which, like the macOS/iOS, to trick the user into thinking it was an advertisement from Apple, before the nun appears with a very loud scream. This was a pretty sneaky way of getting a scare out of people. However, the ads were apparently pretty prevalent, and were, in the article's words, triggering people, namely people of Zitter, who were starting to complain about the ads. And user Baby Divas made a post warning people about the volume icon ad if the user had anxiety or hated jump scares, and to retweet the post to warn others. This post would end up getting the attention of YouTube themselves, and they would state the following: "Appreciate you bringing this to our attention. This ad violates our shocking content policy and it's no longer running as an ad." Additionally, after the ads were pulled, the Nun would later release new advertisements with a message claiming that the original ads were removed for being too frightening, along with an image of the nun with black eyes. So basically, they just kind of ran with it, and the whole controversy only worked in their favor, and added some creepy mystery to the ads if you never got to see them. However, sadly, this means all of them but one of these ads are missing completely now. While the infamous volume icon one has been found, the following 4 are missing and could be described as, quote, 1. A fake buffering logo to trick the user into thinking the ad is struggling to load. Then the nun, Valak, appears with a loud scream. 2. Nothing for about 5 seconds, and then the nun pops up along with a loud scream. 3. A spinning ball, much like the beach ball of death found in Apple Macs. And finally, 4 fades into a hall, then slowly moves down the room. A bell tolls, then the nun appears. There was a 6th ad, however, that was recently uncovered on November 18th of 2024 by user PinkAsketch, commented on the Lost Media Wiki forums thread about the ad that was uploaded by YouTube user InstaSnap Ads in 2018. In the video, it shows an incoming call from an unknown number before being jump scared by Valak. Supposedly, these are one of the ads that was shown on the Instagram and Snapchat in addition to the ones that were shown on YouTube. And of course, you gotta know how it's gonna show you both of these, so if you don't like jump scares, skip past this next part. If you're watching the premiere and you feel that way, I guess turn the volume down for a second. And if you're sleeping while watching this, good morning, bitch. You've been warned. The Wizard. This entry is about a 1927 horror film loosely based on the 1911 novel Baloo by Gaston Leroux, again same guy who wrote the Phantom of the Opera novel. The film was directed by Richard Rossum and distributed by Fox Film Corporation, and is best known for being one of the most sought-after lost silent films, along with the likes of One After Midnight. According to a synopsis of the film on the wiki, quote, "The film's about a professor named Paul Coriolis, whose son was convicted and sentenced to death at the gallows for a murder that he didn't commit. He then seeks revenge by creating an ape-like creature named Baloo, who killed his adversaries. Catching the attention of a detective named Murphy and a newspaper reporter named Stanley Gordon, they both investigate and save 2 intended victims, being Judge Webster and his daughter, from the murder," unquote. Sadly though, this one is completely lost, as the last known copy of the film was destroyed in a fire at Fox's vault in 1937. Amulet. Amulet is a 1991 Soviet horror film based on the novel The Lone Wolf. And the film is about 2 brothers from a Polski village who moved to Kiev for a better life. However, a chain of events happen involving a mysterious death and vampires. It was directed by Nikolai Rashev and was considered by many to be a masterpiece and a cult classic. According to the wiki, the film has never been theatrically released though, as it was only screened in several film clubs at night with a few TV airings, as well as a couple film festivals with no major release besides this. However, you can actually watch this film in full here on YouTube, so it's not lost anymore. Something in the Basement. So this one is much darker than most entries in this iceberg as we move away from the world of fictional horror to real-world horror. Something in the Basement is the debut short horror film by American filmmaker Victor Salva, a man who is also behind the famous Jeepers Creepers series, as well as a convicted sex offender. Notably, this lost short horror film is what led him to being able to create his debut feature film, Clown House, in 1989. Which has become extremely infamous due to the sexual abuse by Victor Salva on Nathan Forrest Winters, the 12-year-old lead actor who played the character in that film named Casey, during its production, including videotaping one of these encounters. Victor Salva was also found with videotapes and magazines containing CSAM material in his home. A truly disgusting, vile, evil man who sadly got to mostly get away away with his actions, because after serving just 15 months of his measly 3-year prison term, Salva was released on parole, and again, ended up having quite a successful career after this, with his most iconic horror film Jeepers Creepers, which is still quite well known to this day, coming out to raving reviews at the time. You would think he wouldn't get another chance at making films again after such an incident, but apparently not. It only made him be able to have a bigger budget for the next film. Go figure. However, thankfully in recent years, this controversy has been much more well acknowledged, and thus interest in his debut short film has come up, mostly out of a morbid curiosity for most people, though not much is known about it. Apparently the basic plot is that a young boy is waiting home alone for his brother to return from a bloody war, discovering something horrifying in the basement during his wait. The film was apparently an allegory, although what exactly that was about is unknown. It starred John Downey, Brian McHugh, and Nathan Forrest Winters, again the same young actor who he would later victimize, not just 3 years later. Something in the Basement has not been seen publicly in decades, and while Clown House has had a DVD and VHS releases pulled from circulation, the film can easily be found online to watch, and physical copies have occasionally been sold on eBay. However, it is unknown if Something in the Basement will ever see the light of day again, and honestly, maybe it's better that way, in my opinion. Stygian. Stygian is an Australian short-budget indie horror film produced in the year of 2000 by Hybrid Films and is notable for being the debut of director, writer, and filmmaker James Wan, who would later go on to be the creator of several extremely successful horror franchises, such as The Conjuring, Insidious, and Saw. According to the wiki, quote, Stygian is a story about a young couple who become unintentionally targets in a life-or-death situation. They come into possession of a powerful talisman that is being sought after by the evil Reapers brothers. As a result, they find themselves trapped in a different realm. Jamie must navigate this unfamiliar world to find Melinda, but he soon realizes he is not the only one in this predicament. It serves as a gutter punk purgatory for deceased villains called Exile, containing mad scientists, killer clowns, gory zombies, and mayhem galore, unquote. Sounds like quite the adventure and a pretty cool concept for a movie overall. However, while this film was shown at some underground horror film festivals around the year 2000, and even obtained a few awards in those, it's never been released in any form to the public, nor on any physical media, and has disappeared since then. However, some clips from it did end up being showcased in a making of documentary for the film Razor Eaters, which you can see here.
And while I was there, I met some other students, like-minded students, and we decided to get together and make another film called Stygian, which I made with James Wan, who has of course gone on to make the film Saw. Got caught up making that. That's sort of an action fantasy film.
And yeah, that's about it. Unfortunately, it is still currently lost. Tales of Mystery. This entry is about a British supernatural television drama anthology series based on the short stories of Algernon Blackwood. The show is hosted by actor John Laurie, who portrayed the author himself, and was apparently quite popular at the time, with 3 whole seasons being produced. And yet, despite that, all 29 episodes are currently completely lost, with only TV Guide ads being proof that it existed at all currently. The Addams Family Funhouse. This one is in reference to a 1973 unsold pilot that was aired on various channels during the 1973 and 1974 television season. It apparently had musical numbers and skits and was overall a kind of a variety show of sorts. However, all that has surfaced of this pilot is a single publicity photo first published in Castle of Frankenstein magazine issue 21, and that's really all there is to this one. The Television Ghost. This one was an early television show that aired from 1931 to 1933 and is often considered to be the first dramatic television anthology ever made, making it an important part of television history that is also completely lost. According to the wiki in regards to the premise of the show, quote, "The show centered on the idea of ghosts telling the stories of how they were murdered. Each episode featured a different story, but the ghost was always portrayed by George Kelting, whose costume involved having his face painted white and a sheet wrapped around him. Due to the technical limitations of the time, the format was closer to that of a radio show, as the video footage only consisted of a continuous shot of Kelting's head and shoulders as he talked. Each broadcast lasted 15 minutes, and the series ran for 2 years until it was finalized in 1933. Presumably at the same time, the W2XAB station suspended operations due to economic turmoil from the Great Depression," unquote. Sadly, due to the nature of it being broadcasted live, and pretty much no one having the ability to record it at the time, and no one at the network recording anything, the series is pretty unanimously considered to be lost for good, with no chance of it ever resurfacing, which is rather unfortunate. Mothman. Mothman was an unreleased independent horror film written and directed by Doug TenNapel, the creator of Earthworm Jim and Cat Scratch. It marked the artist's first and only foray into live-action filmmaking, and according to the wiki, quote, "The film follows Ellis Gladson, an aspiring animator living in a small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. With his work continually rejected by Disney, Gladson spends most of his time looking after an abandoned apartment building that his father inherited. In the midst of his dejection, he suddenly encounters a tall birdman known as the Mothman, a creature that has not been seen in town for 30 years. No one believes Gladson's sightings, and he becomes an outcast instantly. With the help of Old Man Hudson, who claims to have seen the Mothman back in the day, Gladson has to prove that the creature really exists. Things take a turn for the worse when he gets stalked by Agent Fulmer, a man in black who is also on the hunt for the Mothman, but for a much darker purpose," unquote. Sounds like a pretty interesting film. Now, interestingly, the reason for the film's abandonment has never really been revealed, and TenNapel has been hesitant to discuss any aspect of the production quite some time, although he was willing to list it on his website. It also mentioned that the film had evolving lengths from 90 minutes to 7 minutes, I guess. There's a handful of stills from the film as well, and a trailer, which you've been looking at in the background the whole time. But that's about it, though there was some updates about this, being that there's apparently various edits and cuts of the film that again haven't been released publicly. Once again, according to the wiki, on August 21st of 2023, YouTuber Mr. Bones covered the Mothman subject in his Lost Media Limbo series. With this, a few days later, an anonymous viewer who claimed to have worked with Doug TenNapel in the past had contacted Mr. Bones from his coverage, and thus provided the short 22-minute cut of the film that was eventually shared in the Lost Media Wiki Discord server. However, there were much longer feature-length cuts of the film created during the editing process, and none of those cuts have been found so far. On November 28th, 2023, filmmaker Matthew Hannum LG announced that he was nearing completion of a documentary about the making of Mothman, and that it will include behind-the-scenes footage and interviews with the cast and crew. In a Reddit post about the project, Hannum LG wrote the following: "The stuff I've uncovered while making this project is truly bizarre, and steps into some rather dark territory," unquote. Pretty ominous thing to say, but as far as I'm aware, that documentary has yet to come out, so I suppose we'll have to wait and see what he meant by that. Also, I'm not really sure, but I didn't see anywhere where you could watch the short 22-minute cut of the film. I guess you had to join the Discord server to see it, but even then, I don't know if it's even still in there, or if it's just being shared around privately amongst Lost Media enthusiasts at this point. I don't really know, but just figured I'd note that. Black Volga. This entry is in reference to a supposed 1973 film based on the urban legend of the same name. The urban legend, in case you didn't know, was widespread throughout Poland, Romania, Hungary, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Greece, and Mongolia, mainly in the 1960s and 70s. The legend refers to a black, or in some various versions a red, GAZ-21 or GAZ-24 that was allegedly used to abduct and murder people. According to different versions, it was driven by either a communist secret police officer, Russian mafia, Satanists, or Satan himself. The car is described as having white wheel rims, white curtains, or other white elements as well, which actually sounds pretty badass. The film, however, is not lost because it actually doesn't exist. Polish YouTuber Kakper did an investigation to the film and found that the supposed movie was never mentioned in any Polish articles back from the 70s, etc. And there really is no actual proof of it existing at all, thus ironically making the movie about an urban legend a urban legend in of itself. The Hunchback and the Dancer. This entry is about a 1920s silent German horror film that is, as you probably guessed, completely lost. The film was written by Karl Mayer, who also wrote The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. The plot of this film was supposedly about, quote, a repulsive hunchback named James Wilton changes his relationship with women when he discovers a diamond mine in Java. A young woman named Gina, in the rebound from an earlier relationship, begins dating him. Later, when she decides to break up with him and go back to her former lover, the hunchback manages to taint her with a poisonous substance that will kill anyone who kisses her. After two of her paramours die before her eyes, she finally catches on that he had contaminated her, and she decides to get revenge by luring the hunchback into kissing her himself, unquote. And yeah, that's pretty much it on that one. Black Waters. This one is about a 1929 British/American horror all-talking sound film. It was the first British-produced talking picture ever shown in England, but it was actually made in Hollywood since that is where the needed sound equipment was at that time. It was apparently about a weird night watchman that lures a group of people into a run-down old yacht at a San Francisco pier at midnight. Once the boat sets sail, the passengers are murdered off one by one, until only two of the men, Charles and Eunice, remain, along with a kindly old reverend who turns out to actually be the murderer, a crazy ship's captain named Tiger Larrabee, who disguises himself as a reverend to pull off a succession of murders. Yet again, though, the film is completely lost. Figures of the Night, yet another 1920 German silent horror film. This is once again completely lost. This one apparently having being influenced by the works of Edgar Allan Poe and based on the novel Il Gabal Kuperus by Karl Hans Strobel, who, fun fact, was an anti-Semitic and later willingly joined the Nazi Party, which is, pretty cringe. Anyway, the plot of the film is about Thomas Buzug, who is both the richest man in the world and the loneliest. He's a cripple who can only laboriously move on his crutches, domineering, cruel, only full of fanatical love for his son, who lives like a monkey in a cage, climbs on trees and eats nuts. His minions are muscle-bound giants and misshapen dwarves. His cunning secretary only strives to bring wealth into his possession. A dancer he loves leaves him. Then an unemployed inventor demands the hand of his nymphomatic daughter for an invention with which it is supposed to be able to extract oxygen from the air. With it, he wants to blackmail the whole world and become ruler over all countries. Which admittedly sounds so fucking crazy and weird that I do kinda wanna see the movie. But once again, it is completely lost, so fat chance on that. Obey. This one is a 1935 American horror film about a sailor known as the Adventurer, searching for a lost American explorer, and discovers him being held hostage on a remote island in the South Sea. The man is held captive by the island's natives, who have placed him under a voodoo spell known as Obey. The adventurer attempts to halt a death ritual but fails, and the explorer dies. The adventurer is forced to flee the island, taking with him a native woman and the the daughter of the dead explorer. With the help of a map taken from the explorer, the three attempt to locate a chest of gold that has been sunk off the island shore. Meanwhile, the high priest of the island people cast a curse on the three, and a love triangle ensues between those on the ship, which, sounds kind of fucking creepy. How old is that daughter? Also, just want to note, sorry for the lack of pictures or videos for a few of these last entries. Some of these are so obscure that there's basically almost nothing to go off of them, besides just basic descriptions. But yeah, this one is also completely lost. The Shadow of the Desert, originally titled The Shadow of the East, this is a 1924 American silent horror film. The movie is based upon the novel The Shadow of the East by Edith Maud Hull, and the plot of which was described through a review of the film in a film magazine. Quote, Barry Craven is a young Englishman living in India who has taken a native wife, Lolaire. Barry meets his old university friend Saeed, a polished gentleman who is the son of an Algerian sheikh. John Locke and his daughter Gillian visit India, and Barry's former love for Gillian returns, but he cannot marry her as he has a native wife. Crazed by jealousy, Lolaire kills herself, and Barry is called back to England and marries Gillian. His Hindu servant, Kanwar, through his command of Oriental mysticism, then casts a spell on Barry that makes him feel remorse for his former wife, Lolaire's death. This remorse causes Barry to leave Gillian. He goes to the desert and joins Saeed to help fight a bandit chief, which sounds random, but okay. And then Gillian arrives on the scene. Saeed denies that he is with Barry and attempts to force himself on Gillian, but his better nature asserts itself, I guess. Bro was gonna assault her, but decided, nah, I'm better than this. But anyway, then a messenger comes to Saeed and tells him of Barry's danger. Saeed repents, sends aid, rescues Barry, and restores Gillian to him. And then Barry's servant Kungwar is killed, and with his death, the curse, which was the Shadow of the East, is lifted, unquote. All that being said, there are no known prints of the film in any archive, thus making it lost. The Weird Ones. The Weird Ones is a 1962 American sci-fi horror sexploitation comedy film that is now considered lost. The movie was about an alien creature, the Astronic, coming to Earth and terrorizing and killing women. Two press agents specialized in erotica used the services of a female alien referred to as a Cosmo Cutie to then lure the monster and capture him. And that's about all there is known about this one. Knights of the Werewolf. And for our final tier, we start with Knights of the Werewolf, a 1968 Spanish/French horror film about a professor who learns that a student of his suffers from lycanthropy, and under the guise of helping him, uses him as an instrument of revenge by controlling him by means of sound waves when he transforms. Very little is known about the film, however, with this photo being the only thing that exists of it currently. Due to this has actually led many to suspect that the movie might never have actually existed, and might have instead existed more as a concept title to fill out director Rene Govard's resume when he was just starting out in the film industry. At the same time, a movie from 1970 titled The Fury of the Wolfman has also been theorized to be what Knights of the Werewolf turned into, or was released as, because many have pointed out that they are very similar in their plot and premise, and that would explain why Knights of the Werewolf doesn't exist, because it never released under that title, but there is no confirmation of that as of yet. Lock Up Your Daughters. This one is rather infamous. It is supposed to be a horror film starring the famous horror star Bela Lugosi, released in 1959, 3 years after Lugosi died. The movie is presumed to be lost, but at the same time, there is actually very little evidence of it existing to begin with only some newspaper features being anything to go off of, which is kind of wild considering it would have been one of, if not the last film released with Bela Lugosi in it. And with how iconic he was in film, you would suspect there would be more reviews, opinions, posters, something that would exist of it. There is apparently a description of the film, as the wiki article notes, which is described as, quote, "Due to there being an extensive lack of info on Lock Up Your Daughters, there's no official word on the plot. However, in one review of the film, it states that the plot of the film involved an evil or vampiric doctor played by Lugosi, doing evil experiments on women in an attempt to bring his dead wife back to life. The review also claimed that clips from Lugosi's previous films were included in the movie, but there is also reports that the film showed Lugosi as a host who would show clips from his older films, and some state that cash would be given to audience members if they could guess the correct film as to which clip it was from," unquote, which sounds like two very different movies and concepts. It seems like the movie does or did exist, but was only ever given a much more limited release, and then perhaps there just wasn't that much advertising around it at all. If it was just a clip show, essentially, of Lugosi's best films with a perhaps audience interaction thing, maybe it was more of just a interactive movie theater thing that was just there in a few theaters and wasn't meant to be a grand release of anything, but who knows. Black the Ripper. Yet another film we don't know for sure of the existence of. You'll notice that a lot in this last tier. This was an alleged blaxploitation horror film that would have been released in 1974 through 1976, with it being a blaxploitation version of the real-life murders of Jack the Ripper. It's rumored that Frank Salieri, who is the writer of earlier genre horror movie Blackenstein, may have been the director, but Black the Ripper is otherwise shrouded in mystery. While there are a few people who have claimed to have seen it, and the website dailygrindhouse.com has an article that goes into great detail about the film, it is not actually available in any official form, and no one named as connected with the production has come forward to describe its involvement. And it should also be noted that the article written on the dailygrindhouse.com was also published on April 1st, so any information from that may just be a joke. Several screenshots of the supposed film have come around, but again, none of these have been confirmed to actually be from the film, as many have just taken random screenshots from other obscure blaxploitation films and claimed that it was a still from the movie. Though many suspect the film does exist, despite the lack of evidence, due to many blaxploitation films being lost back in the day due to them simply not being considered worthy of preservation. Bonus entry, Bulgasari. So this one is just so weird, I feel like I had to include it somewhere on this iceberg. As the Wikipedia article on the film notes, Bulgasari, or Bulgasari at the end of Songdo, is a lost 1962 South Korean kaiju film, directed and edited by Kim Maejong-jae, produced by K-Wang Song Films, and was the first ever movie monster to be made in South Korea, as well as the first Korean film to use special effects. The plot of which being about a martial artist who is resurrected as the iron-eating monster Bulgasari to have revenge on his murderers. The film was heavily inspired by the 1954 Godzilla or Gojira, as you might imagine. Though sadly, when this film was released, it was met with extremely negative reviews from critics, especially because it was apparently had pretty unconvincing special effects, the direction was supposedly bad, and the acting seemed to be bad as well. Though we sadly cannot confirm any of these things for sure, as it sort of disappeared after its initial release. Perhaps saved somewhere, but more likely destroyed. Despite this, it is considered extremely important to the history of South Korean cinema, and on a much darker note, the film certainly caught the attention of one particularly infamous individual, as there is actually a remake of Bulgasari in the form of a film titled Pulgasari, which would be directed by Shin Sang-ok during his abduction in North Korea alongside Chow Eun-hee when they were forced to make films for the North Korean film industry to basically serve as high-quality propaganda pieces to bolster the North Korean military and their country, art, etc., all being under the command of Kim Jong-il, who apparently was a huge kaiju monster movie fan, and loved Godzilla, but also seemed to have been a fan of the Bulgasari film as well. Makes me wonder if perhaps he, or I guess now Kim Jong-un, has a copy of it somewhere. Dracula Russian film. Once again, in the realm of the unknown, Dracula, 1920, is an alleged Russian film adaptation of the novel. There, as you could guess by now though, is no production stills, footage, or significant information about the supposed movie, and even the picture on the Lost Media Wiki page is just a fan-made piece to have something there to represent the movie, I guess. If the film did indeed exist, it would have been the first film adaptation of Bram Stoker's 1895 novel, which would be pretty cool, but again, we can't know for sure, though some discussion over it possibly existing and having been subsequently destroyed in the Russian Civil War has been theorized. There have been several hoaxes and fake findings of the movie over the years, sadly only poisoning the well and making it all the more difficult and disappointing when it all turns out to be fake. All the same though, it would be a holy grail of sorts, as far as both film and horror fiction history and Russian film history is concerned, but it seems pretty unlikely that it will ever be found if it really does exist at this point. Ringu Brussels cut. This one is pretty interesting, and again, unproven, but something that has quite a history of discussion and research put into it. According to the wiki article, a number of unproven eyewitness accounts, there is an alleged alternate version of Hideo Nakata's 1998 cult horror classic Ringu, dubbed the Brussels cut. It was said to have been significantly more graphic than the definitive cut seen today. It was supposedly shown at the Brussels International Festival of Fantasy Film in 1999 for its European premiere. The Brussels cut is said to contain a much more disturbing opening mouth effect, wherein the victims' mouths were noticeably vertically deformed, as they were, incidentally, in the film's 2002 remake, made in America, The Ring. This change was said to have given the film a much creepier effect, with testimonies praising the Brussels screening overall. Director Hideo Nakata, when asked twice in separate interviews about the possibility of an alternate cut of Ringu, denied having any knowledge of such a cut, though this has not hindered supposed witnesses of testifying to its legitimacy. While most people have just passed off the Brussels cut as nothing more than an urban legend, the surprising number of people who have come forward claiming to have seen it is too significant for others to deny, preferring to believe that either Hideo Nakata was, for some reason, attempting to hide its existence, or that someone other than him had tampered with the cut before it was screened. Notably, since word of the Brussels cut broke online, several people have made claims that the alternate cut aired on both Spanish and British TV, though those claims have been heavily disputed. Whether or not the Brussels cut truly exist or not may never be known. I personally think that this is just an urban legend, and that people are getting the original Ringu and the American The Ring remake mixed up in their memories, most likely, since the American version has the exact mouth effect people are describing. But who knows? Maybe there really does exist a Brussels cut, and it'll randomly be dropped one day. The Curse of the Moonchild. This entry is about a 1972 American horror film starring Adam West, about a Victorian-era English village whose children, born under the astrological sign of Cancer, are compelled to join a demonic union. Sounds like a pretty interesting concept for a film, actually. However, this one's existence is unconfirmed, as little is known about the film's production or availability, and there is once again very little evidence to suggest it even exists at all. So yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, 1901 film. Yet another silent film adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and sadly it is once again completely lost, which is a shame because it is considered the first American horror film ever made. But once again, there just isn't anything there to talk about besides it apparently having existed. Sadly, just like every other one of these, they just didn't take care of this stuff back in the day. The mentality of many production studios was that films were disposable quite often. It is only now that we consider films as art and appreciate them for what they are that the true tragedy of that short-sighted thinking comes to leave a permanent scar. The System of Dr. Gaudron. One more silent horror film for the road. The System of Dr. Gaudron is a 1913 French short silent horror film, later released in America under the title of The Lunatics. And this movie is centered around a journalist who, accompanied by his wife, travels to an old castle complete with moat, which has been turned into an asylum, in the hopes of writing about a new approach to curing patients, which is said to be practiced there. Arriving during the storm, they quickly discover that the inmates have taken over, and that the cure to insanity is gouging an eye and slitting the throat. One doctor seems to be practicing this technique. Another believes that they can float. Escape seems impossible, and the reporter is drawn to a table to undergo the cure. But a gust of wind scattering the doctor's papers provides a distraction, and with the help of a sympathetic inmate, the two protagonists are able to flee to safety. Sadly, this one is, yet again, completely lost, which is a shame because it got some pretty high praise from critics at the time, with one saying that it was, quote, the kind of picture that will put immediate quietus on any buzz of conversation in the auditorium and will be called a terrible, powerful picture. It is artistic, real, and gripping, unquote. And certainly for its time in 1913, sounds like a pretty damn intense movie, so I can certainly believe that. Simon C. Productions Halloween Anime. And for our final entry, we have this entry that has no official page on the wiki as of yet, but instead just a post on the Lost Media Wiki forums by user Nightspawn that says the following, quote, so I was working on creating the subreddit for the Simon C. Productions Halloween Anime, grabbing links and stuff, and I accidentally searched the text content section of the Wayback Machine, and I found a book called Screenwriting on the internet, a book that also mentions Fatal Blade, which the website also mentions, so I can only presume this is the same Simon C. Productions. That means we now have an actual name of someone who worked in the company, which is a good piece of any puzzle, unquote. Now, honestly, just that made me feel like I was missing some sort of context here, since this is the only thing that is linked on the Iceberg page. So I went looking and found a post on the Lost Media Reddit by user Nightspawn of Luna that gives much more details. Quote, throughout the history of the Halloween franchise, there have been many ideas that never saw the light of day. One of the most interesting of these stories is a little-known attempt at an anime-style project made by a company called Simon C. Productions. I only know about it via a link I got from the trivia section of the Halloween franchise's TV tropes page. A link is then provided to the article where it says, quote, while rumors about a planned Halloween meets Hellraiser franchise matchup continue to fly, Creature Corner reports that Simon C. Productions is teaming up with Westgate Incorporated, planning to turn Michael Myers into an anime character. Their animated Halloween project is getting underway soon, and right now they're holding a contest to design the poster that's open to the public. You can find out more at the company's official website. Hurry, the deadline for entries is October 10th. C Productions is also developing a new version of Perfect Blue, based on the same stories that inspired Satoshi Kon's popular feature, in which a pop star is stalked by a psychopathic fan, unquote. Which is pretty wild to think about. A fucking Halloween anime. That's something I never knew I wanted until just now. But what became of this supposed thing, and was the rumor even true? Going back to the Reddit post, quote, using that I was able to get a link to the actual website of Simon C. Productions, though the website makes no mention of the Halloween anime in the project section. And yeah, going through the current projects page, there isn't any mention of the Halloween anime. Though to make a small side tangent, the Perfect Blue adaptation I found weird enough to go and read what they had planned for it, because if you didn't know, the Satoshi Kon classic was loosely based around the light novel Perfect Blue, Complete Metamorphosis by author Yoshikazu Takeuchi, but this other film project would have been an adaptation of that light novel sequel Perfect Blue Awakened from a Dream, which was an anthology light novel containing 3 stories, which this anime that never came out would have adapted, which means this is technically also a piece of lost media. So there's a bonus one for you, I suppose. But anyway, back to the Halloween anime. Quote, after digging more, I was able to find the design contest rules for making the poster, something discussed in the original Fangoria article, which indeed says right there, we're currently developing an animated version of Halloween. We would like your original Halloween idea for the poster for the film, which would suggest that even if it never got very far, that yes, there really was gonna be a Halloween anime. However, that's about it. Besides it literally being a project that was being worked on at some point, we don't really know anything other than that. It would be cool to see some of these posters that might have been submitted for the contest, if there were any submissions, or if there are any possible concept art or sketches of the character made, any ideas put forward for what they were going to do with the anime. But who knows if any of that even exists, or if it managed to survive at all outside of just the concept of a Halloween anime with not much else being there. Perhaps the contest for the poster was sort of a means of gauging interest as well. As noted before in the Lost Media forum post, there is also a book that was found that references the film also existing in some way, but again, nothing more has come from that lead either. Still nonetheless, certainly an interesting piece of what if lost media, and one that I definitely would love to see more of, if possible, if it exists at all. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much for watching and joining me through this journey through the lost horror media iceberg. If there's ever any other sort of lost media content or more obscure type of stuff that you'd like to see me cover in the future, be sure to comment down below and I'll certainly look into it. Maybe not as a full-on iceberg, but maybe as more of a smaller curated thing once in a while. I also want to take this time to thank all of my loyal patrons and channel members for continuing to support this channel and everything I do. And remember that there is actually 2 exclusive videos on my Patreon and channel memberships. That being the coverage of both Jeff the Killer novellas, the second of which has never really been covered by anyone on YouTube before. And trust me when I say, it is quite the weird and wild ride. But that being said, thank you to all my night eggs and my night owlets, as well as a very special thank you to all of my great night owls, including Anon, Bunzo, Bandan, Sombra Devante 06, Jeffrey Robry, and Hexmaniac Hannah, as well as a super duper special thank you to all of my arch owls, including the wise Nicodemus, the lovely Leanne Loves Christ, the daring Daniel Petrie, the Super Saiyan Star Punch Gaming, the fearless Forgotten Ace, and the Supersonic Sword. Thank you all so very much for your continued support, and if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it, be sure to like and subscribe and help me out in the algorithm. But until next time, this has been Dylan the Night Owl, flying off.